Welcome to the Why Didn't I Know podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jenny Martin, and in this episode, we're talking about claiming your spiritual authority. So let's talk about what spiritual authority is. Spiritual authority is the idea that you are here in a flesh suit, in a human body, but you are not only stuck in the human realm. You have an aspect of yourself that is tethered, that is connected to the very source of creation. We are connected to something that is bigger than us, that is order beneath the chaos, that created us for a purpose on earth. And, let's just face it. I have seen real miracles happen in people's lives and in my own life. And I am absolutely convinced that this wasn't just the human being putting positive thoughts out there and manifesting things because they were thinking positive. There's absolutely a supernatural element to it. And until you walk that path and allow yourself to conceptualize that there's something greater, then you won't actually see that possibility for yourself. And the other side of this is, I had a friend who said to me one time, I used to think that only people that weren't that intelligent believed in a higher power, that if you were intelligent, you didn't do that. But then the awareness came that a lot of the most brilliant people in history have believed in a higher power. I like talking about Isaac Newton, who was an alchemist, who was also the greatest scientist on the planet. And he very much believed in God, not in a passive way that, I'm going to pray to God to fix things in my life, but more in the way that we're talking about here today, which is your spiritual authority. And the other aspect of this, why you need spiritual authority, when we're talking about the fact that this world is not just material, this world is not just physical. What you can touch, see, smell, feel around you is not all there is. If you have had an experience with a psychedelic that takes you into a realm that feels more real than here, you'll know what I'm talking about. And, you don't have to have taken a psychedelic. We have the psychedelics, as I always talk about, within our body, and you can touch into a realm. All the mystics have done this. I believe Yeshua did this. Mary Magdalene did this. You can touch into a realm that is more real than here. And what we know from the science that has been suppressed, that there is this level. It's not just an esoteric concept. There is another level of existence that we're all connected into. We can't see it, but you could equate it to an invisible internet. Indigenous people knew about it. Chief Seattle, an indigenous leader long ago, said, we are connected by the web of creation. And it's this sense that if there is this information field, it's not even energy, it's information at this level of torsion physics. If we are connected by this information field that the mystics knew about, that the suppressed science tells us about, then what that tells us, and this is important to realize, especially if you're dealing with a lot of defeating thoughts right now, if you're dealing with a lot of depressing thoughts or fearful thoughts, your thoughts, because we're connected by all this energy, all this information field, your thoughts do not just come from your own head. Our consciousness is not just related to the gray matter in our skull. Our consciousness is part of this field around us. I think we've all had the experience of feeling good, walking into a room where other people are feeling down, and even if we didn't interact with them, leaving that place and feeling down ourselves. How can something like that happen? And that's because thoughts are not just contained in our mind, and we absorb the thoughts of others. You might even find this if you travel a lot. You go into a certain city and you can feel like there's a heaviness over that city. There's a lot of people that are hopeless in that place. There's a lot of people that are dealing with depression. You might visit another place, and it's easier to think positive in that location. Why is that? The reason is our thoughts are not just private. I'm not saying people can necessarily read your thoughts, but the vibration that it carries, there's a vibration associated with the thoughts you dwell on, and that becomes part of the fabric that makes up the atmosphere around you. And the point here is that not every thought is your own. Yes, you're going to think thoughts if you're fearful events about your own life, but the fear itself might have been something you picked up. We talk about picking up a virus, but there's also a mind virus that can be transferred. Anger can be transferred, fear can be transferred. And thankfully, so can thoughts of hope, so can thoughts of joy. That's why in ancient times, from early on, in Göbekli Tepe, the very first structure, actual group of buildings that were built by people, was not for an agricultural purpose, was not for some kind of practical purpose, but it was built for religious ceremony. It was built for people to get together, praise, worship, be in song and dance together, not the way that we think of going to a church today and sitting and listening to somebody in robes preach on at you or read some sermon. No, we're talking about active song and dance and people worshiping. And when you do that collectively, when you walk, if you're feeling low and you walk into a room with a bunch of people dancing and singing, you pick up on that vibe too. It lifts you up if the people are doing that. Because again, the thoughts, the energy associated with them, the vibration transfers. So all of that to say that if you are feeling low right now, there are a lot of people on the planet that are allowing passively that energy to infiltrate their mind. That is happening all over the place. And granted, there are realistic things going on in our world today that you could say, wow, I have a lot of reasons to be afraid. But that doesn't make the problem that you're dealing with easier. Let's just face it. It is much easier to deal with a problem if you remove all of the intense, dramatic feeling around it. Now, that's not to say to bypass your feelings or to spiritually bypass and pretend like you're not feeling something. There's certainly something to be said about giving yourself compassion, honoring what you're feeling, asking that feeling what it's there to tell you. If it's anger, how were you violated? What action do you need to take to protect yourself? But what I'm saying is not always is it your own thought that you're picking up on. It's very, very easy to take on the fear that's happening in the bigger global world or the anger. And what we know in terms of how the body deals with that vibration is it ends up being the forerunner of disease. The body works in a certain way that it needs a state of coherence, which is the energy running through your body in an orderly way. And when you introduce an emotion that is a chaotic emotion, it changes the vibrational rate in your cells and facilitates the breakdown of processes that could eventually lead to some disease. So what we need to do is to take hold of what we have been given, which is our ability to claim our spiritual authority. And when you get good at this, what you realize is you need to think about your thinking. And that's called in psychology metacognition. So when you're feeling afraid, when you're feeling maybe even panic come over you, ask yourself, what am I thinking right now? What am I thinking? Because any of the sensations that happen in your body, maybe the shortness of breath, the feeling of collapse, anything that feels anxious to you or panic to you or overwhelming or even feeling exhausted, all of that, that comes from first something that's going on in your head. And so ask yourself, when you're feeling a certain way that's low or scared or anxious or panicked, what thought am I thinking right now? And sometimes this thought is not necessarily even from you. When we're talking about a supernatural world, which I started out talking about that today, you have to realize is that there is dark energy out there, and there is energy that is uplifting. Yes, there is a dark, sinister energy out there that people allow into their being inadvertently, innocently. We are not told that we can actually challenge our thoughts, that we can actually use our spiritual authority to send them away. And we can, because that thought of heaviness, that thought of depression, there's a dark energy to that. And, there is a lot of misinformation out there that says it's really good to allow that dark energy and alchemize it and all of that. That's not the alchemy that the early Christianity was about. It's not about using the darkness to try to get to light. There's no energy in the darkness. If you have ever, I hope you haven't, encountered someone who really is a sinister, dark person, and if you are a person of the light who always is trying to live a spiritual life, what you'll notice is a dark, sinister person will need to feed off your light by keeping you depressed, by keeping you controlled, all of those things. Because when someone is following a path of darkness, they can't generate their own energy. There is no energy in the darkness. So they need to glom on to find innocent people who have no idea that this happens in the supernatural realm, and they actually have to extract your light. And it is up to us as people who have been given spiritual authority by our Creator to say, I'm not going to dwell in allowing my mind to be controlled by anything, either a human, either a supernatural force, by anything. And I'm not going to allow my mind to catastrophize worst case scenarios. I refuse to do that. And it is a process of spiritual authority is that as a human being, we are incapable of dealing with dark energy, of dealing with this supernatural influence. And so we must assert our connection with a higher power who never wants us to live in a debilitating way. And so the way that you do that is you, first of all, when you're feeling a certain way, like I'm feeling panicked right now or feeling whatever, ask yourself, what am I thinking right now? And then when you realize that thought is a pretty dark thought, you must take it captive and you tell it to leave. And this is where we don't just do it on our own authority. You do it in the authority of, you can do it in Mary Magdalene's authority. You can do it in Yeshua's authority. You can do it in the goddess Isis' authority. But it needs to be in the authority of a power that is greater than you. You've been given the sovereign right to assert your connection to a higher power. And in the name of that higher power, whatever you choose to call it, the goddess, the god, Yeshua, Magdalene. I mean, Yeshua's not God. Magdalene's not the goddess, but they are connection points for us because having the sense that there's a presence that pervades all of nature, that is connected to you, is true and it's real and you can certainly call on it. But what our human finite mind can sometimes fail to grasp is that this omnipresent presence, which is the divine, actually has a personal relationship with you. It's not just this impersonal, pantheistic energy of the divine that's out there and could give a shit about you. That is absolutely not true. It is both a presence that is all powerful, that created your cells, that is breathing through you right now. That's why you're able to be alive, that is beating your heart right now. And even Isaac Newton, the greatest scientist of all time, who knew science, believed that all of the things that, cause our heart to beat and our breath to move through us, it's not just the result of some mechanical operation. It has a more primal cause than that, and it is divine. But what I was saying a second ago is that it's really hard sometimes, maybe you don't have this problem, but sometimes to think that that presence that is everywhere present, that presence of the divine, that it actually knows my life, that it actually cares about what I'm going through. And that's the only reason that we may find it easier to connect to God through a historical figure that has represented that relationship, and a historical figure such as Mary Magdalene, such as Yeshua, for instance. I've had people work with Saint Bridget or, different individuals throughout time that have exemplified, embodied this direct relationship to the divine. As soon as you really practice this, casting out thoughts in the name of the Creator, in the name of the Creatrix, in the name of the Holy One, which is you, but it's also something bigger than you. When you cast out that thought and you focus on the thought of what you have been given connection to unconditional love. And when people do psychedelics, Michael Pollan, in his book, How to Change Your Brain, he said this. He goes, oh my God, there is unconditional love. And you know what? I think God gave us plant medicines, not because we're all supposed to do them. I do not agree with that at all. It's not advisable for a lot of people. But for the rest of us that can just hear those stories, oh my God, that person experienced unconditional love. What does that tell me? What does that tell me about the books of the mystics who have talked about unconditional love? It tells me it's real, because you can have an atheist sometimes do a plant medicine and go, holy crap. I mean, I don't think Michael Pollan was a big person on the divine. And here he is experiencing unconditional love. And so you got to realize anything that is the opposite in terms of fear, in terms of hopelessness, in terms of depression, it's not of God. And I completely disagree with a lot of the sentiments that are going on today that everything is God. If it's fear, it's God. If it's anger, it's God. It's not true. It's not true. And you have to get that, because if you go, okay, well, I'm just going to be in fear because that's of God. The distinction here is not that you're a bad person for being afraid. It's not that you're being a sinner because you're depressed. That's 100% not true. In fact, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene says that there is no sin. But when we understand the science of this, the physics of this, know that your body is run on vibration, it adds a completely different interpretation of why you don't want to stay in those lower vibrational emotions, because it brings your whole body into a different vibrational rate, and you're not going to connect with the dimension that is unconditional love, that is joy, that is everything that we are given as divine beings. We are given the possibility of living in that state of peace. You know, I'm not a big Bible reader myself, but I think there are kernels of truth written in the scripture. And one of the things that it talks about is we have been given supernaturally peace that passes all understanding. What does that mean? It means your logical mind won't get it. Your logical mind will say, holy crap, I have this problem and I have that problem. I have a lot of reasons to be worried. Your mind will tell you that. And what we are told in terms of the supernatural element of this in the scripture is that you can have all of those same problems, all of those same things that would stress another person, but you don't need to be stressed. And yes, you might say, well, of course I'm being stressed. Well, we can live with something not going right and certainly work actively to fix it. And you get a lot more inspiration, downloads from the divine when you're not in a stressed out mode. New insights will show up. New synchronicities will show up. New avenues of changing things will show up. I mean, there's always a flow of information to you that will provide solutions, new resolutions, but you block that flow when you're in a contracted state, when you're in a shutdown state, and when you feel like there isn't any hope. So the point is this, we actually have more control over what we're feeling than we might think. We can assert our spiritual authority to get out of a mind virus that might have come into us that is making us feel defeated, that is making us feel depressed, and we can cast that out. It's like an energy form that has taken over our mind and makes us believe that, no, these are my thoughts. This is my life I'm worried about. I'm not worried about someone else's life. I get it. But the original energy, the lower vibration that caused you to generate all of those thoughts can be something that you pick up. And it can happen as easily as scrolling on social media and looking at all of the bad news that's happening. Just notice, pay attention to what's happening in your body from the neck down before you get on to social media. What is going on in your body before you open up your app? What is your body feeling like? And then how does your body feel after you close down that app and you get off of it? And what you'll start to realize is, I start to feel icky in my body, or I start to feel queasy in my stomach, or I start to feel shortness of breath, or some other symptom after you've engaged in certain activities, i.e., social media. And I'm not saying the social media is the epitome of darkness. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying you can just be interacting with other people or be living in a location where there is a lot of people that are feeling hopeless and despair, and that can just become your reality by default. And so if we do not assert our spiritual authority and we're just passive to all of these thought forms that are flying all around us all the time, we can't see them with our human eyes. We've been told that there's just empty space out there in terms of the cosmos, that it's a vacuum. But that is not what the torsion physics, the suppressed science tells us. It tells us that there is this information grid, and our thoughts plug into that. Our thoughts actually shift things. Do you know that during 9/11, when the whole world actually was in kind of this PTSD shock when the Twin Towers came down, that at Princeton University, there was something called random event generators where they were measuring the fluctuations in the field in this unseen energy field, information field. Now, it's supposed to always be random, but when pretty much the whole world was catalyzed into this feeling of shock and disbelief and kind of a PTSD kind of reaction in the hours after the 9/11 event happened, the random event generators at Princeton University that were detecting shifts in the field noticed a measurable shift. And that's because the mind virus had taken over. People all were collectively in this state of fear. And it actually shifted things in the grid, this energy field that is not empty. There is not empty space around us. So we have to realize we can assume that we can actually take on energy, feelings, thoughts that really didn't even originate within us, but we start to believe they're our own. So this is where we need to listen to what our thoughts are. Pay attention to what we're thinking. It's called metacognition. Think about your thinking. It's different than mindfulness. Mindfulness is detached observing. This is another step of that. It's not just allowing the thoughts and detaching from that. This is asserting your sovereign spiritual right to tell that thought that it has no place in your mind and calling on the higher power to replace that thought with the opposite. So if it was a thought of fear and worry, you cast that out in the name of the divine, and you call in the peace that passes all understanding that you have been given as a divine right. You have been given the right for love, comfort, peace, security, joy, happiness, and you do not have to dwell on the opposite. Now, granted, we're human beings. There's ups and downs in life. You can have a momentary feeling of worry, a momentary feeling of feeling overwhelmed, but a continuous living at that lower vibration is what we're talking about. And when it becomes your habitual self, when it becomes the way that you identify yourself, oh, I'm just an anxious person. I'm just, a depressed person. That needs to be challenged. You need to challenge that and say, I refuse to accept that as my identity. I refuse that because when I was created, I don't care about the conditions of your birth. You could have been created in a situation where it was an accident. For instance, your mom didn't intend to get pregnant. The point here is that from the Creator, you were created with intention, you were created with love, you were created on purpose, you are here for a reason, and you have never been disconnected from that love of the divine. You might have a hard relationship with your human mom. You might have a hard relationship with your human father or not even know who they are. It doesn't matter. You have a direct relationship that can never, ever be taken from you of an unconditional love that created you. And it did not create you to live in panic. It did not create you to live in fear. It did not create you to live in depression. Those are things that we are passively accepting in the world today as, well, it's just me. It's just me, or it has to do with my past. Yes, there may be things that you need to work through in your past. There may be childhood issues, granted. But the larger thing here is we have an epidemic of this happening in the world today. And I'm just saying to you that there's a supernatural element of this that we need to face head on and assert our authority and say, no, this fear is not going to take up space in my mind any longer. I cast that out in the name of the divine and call on the divine to give you peace in place of worry. Call on that. Assert that authority. You do that not with anger. If you have anger and tell that thought to leave, well, then you're magnetizing more dark energy. So you don't do it with anger to get rid of the thought that you don't want. Don't do it with anger, because it's not you that's getting rid of the thought. You're calling on the divine to rid this from you. And you're calling on the divine in gratitude to replace that lower vibrational thought with a higher vibrational thought. And when you do that, by universal law, by the law of this universe, if you assert your authority and tell the lower vibrational thought to leave, in the name of the Creator, claim the opposite. You're not asking for the opposite. You're claiming the peace. You're claiming the love. You're claiming the security. You're not asking, oh, please give me peace. No, no, no. There's no asking. You don't have to ask for something that you already have. If you own a car, would you ask, oh, can I have a car? No, you already have it. Okay? You already have the peace, but you have to claim it. In the name of the divine, I claim the peace that is my divine birthright. It is my divine birthright. And this is how we assert our spiritual authority. Until we've been told this, we walk around passively accepting any thought, any lower vibrational frequency that is out there in the world. We passively accept it. We feel burdened. We feel overwhelmed. And we just live in that sense in our mind. We live in that sense, okay, well, it's just who I am. It's just what I have to put up with. I just have to struggle through this. You don't. You don't. You need to assert your spiritual authority to tell that thought to leave, to claim the opposite. Now, it doesn't happen when you do it once. It has to be a daily practice, a moment-to-moment practice. It gets easier, but your job is to not walk around and tell people, I'm just a fearful person. I'm just a worried person. Stop talking like that, because that is not the way that you have been created. You have been created as a person. And I'm not talking about you need to be a perfect person. I'm talking about you have not been created with those kinds of debilitating identities. That's not the way that you're created. You are created connected to the divine. But everything in our world, on social media, in the news, has us believe that we're victims to this larger sense of what's going on. We're not victims. We can claim our spiritual authority and say that we're not going to live in this. And here's the thing. I am an advocate of doing inner child work. I absolutely am. And that there's certainly a place for that. But there is a divine sovereign divinity, but there is a divine sovereign within you that is powerfully able to walk you through anything that's going on in your life. So can you do inner child work too? Sure you can. But you do it from a place of knowing your identity as a spiritual being first. You're walking a human path, and there's going to be things that you have to deal with for sure. But at the core of that, underneath all of that, underneath all the inner child work, underneath all of that is an order that is more powerful than the chaos that might have happened in your life. There is an order, and you can rest on that. You don't spiritually bypass by using that and pretend everything has been perfect in your life. No, there's been real problems, but you can go through any storm. Face it realistically, deal with the challenges in a real practical sense. If you are doing it from this state of knowing you are supported, loved, and held by the divine, and the divine can't swoop into your life and shift your thoughts for you. This is not the kind of situation where you're on your knees begging for a higher power to change your thoughts. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about saying, I can't do this myself. I need to rely on something that's greater than me just like they do in AA. It's not of themselves that they get rid of this compulsion to drink. They rely on something bigger than themselves. And that's one of the most powerful aspects that has turned people's lives around in the addiction recovery movement, is because they're not trying to do it themselves. They're relying on a higher power. And that goes to do with our thoughts as well. We call in that help from beyond us when we're in that moment, right, nipping it in the bud. I'm starting to feel a fearful thought. Okay, I'm going to cast this out. I'm starting to feel a fearful, and we deal with that right in the moment, and we nip it in the bud. And the point here is to deal with your thoughts right in the moment, to nip them in the bud. As soon as you feel uneasy, ask yourself what you're thinking. If there's some realistic thing that you need to act on, maybe the fear is telling you, don't go down that, don't talk to that person. Okay, listen to that. That's a momentary helpful fear. Not every fear is something that you need to cast away. But if it's just a foreboding fear all the time, that's kind of a dark cloud over you, this is when we assert our spiritual authority and say, that needs to leave. That thought form needs to leave my body now, my mind now, in the name of the divine. It must leave now. And in the name of the divine, in the name of the goddess, the God, I claim my right to peace. I claim security. I claim the peace and security and contentment. And you do that. And you do that as a practice, knowing that the Creator is working on your behalf when you do your part to assert your authority. The Creator is not going to come in and shift all your thinking and shift all your circumstances for you. It's you claiming this as the way that you are actually designed to live. Yes, there is going to be issues that show up in life for all of us, and there's going to be things that show up in the larger world. But can we walk through any storm with an inner sense of steadiness, with an inner sense of peace, with an inner sense of knowing that there is a higher reality, a spiritual reality that you're tapping into, that everything is okay, will be okay. You're going to not only get through and survive whatever you're dealing with, but you're going to be absolutely a new person because of this, because you have actually claimed who you are as a divine being. So that's what I know for you. That's what I know to be true for you, for all of us. I've had clients who have said this to me. They said, I did not know I had any ability to resist my thoughts. I just gave in to them. I gave in to how I was feeling. I had no idea that I could cast this out. And what has been the most helpful thing when I've heard from clients, when they've told me what has transformed their life, is when they realized it wasn't always their own thought. It wasn't always just something that was coming up from their past personal history. When they started to realize that we're in this grid of energy and we can sometimes inadvertently tap into thoughts that aren't ours, that's when people have said, oh my God, I tapped into something that supernaturally, and I needed to get rid of that. That's when things have really shifted for people in a powerful, positive way. So I'll leave that with you. Thank you so much for joining me. Go ahead and leave a review for this podcast if it's been helpful for you, and I look forward to talking with you next time.